Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and I'm your host, Adrian Danila. This is episode number 22, and my guest on this episode is Peter Roosen. Peter is the co-founder, president, and board chair of Castagra products. And he's also the inventor of Ecodur Roof Coating. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Hey, great to be with you, Adrian. Thanks for inviting me.
Peter, my first question that I want to ask is the Ecodur Roof Coating product. You know, it's used by very well-known companies at scale: General Mills, Tyson Foods, NFL, and McDonald's. What makes this product special? Like, what are some advantages of the product being used for roof coatings?
Okay, well, it falls into a couple of areas, but what was interesting is when I developed this product, I developed it many years ago in the early 1990s with sustainability being an important requirement, not an option, but a requirement. And that was a little bit early. It took a little while for the market to catch up with this idea. So here we are 40 years later, or 30 years later, talking about the same things. But, forward leaning companies are much more interested in this. However, sustainability on its own doesn't cover the whole thing. It still has to, be as good or better than the things that are out there. Has to be economically sensible and practical. So, better, faster, cheaper still wins the day. But we need to be sustainable, and we're no longer cheaper. That's interesting. People are willing to pay a little bit more for having these extra premium things within the product.
So how did you come up with this idea to develop this product? Like, what was the spark that actually made you think, okay, I'm gonna develop this new product?
Well, no surprise to a lot of people that have been through these sorts of things, is the path was a little bit bumpy. It originally started with a friend of mine who's from Austria. He was a master finishing carpenter, and he was doing these spiral staircases in big houses and so on, and says, Peter, I'd already sold a previous business, so I wasn't doing much. He says, can you come up with some plastic that will go around curved wall instead of wood, because it takes me forever to cut pieces of wood and steam them and laminate them and do all these things. And at the time I said, no, I'm not interested. Plastics are evil. I want nothing to do with them. The world is filling up with all this stuff, and I want to work on other things that are more in the direction of the future. So, but he was, like so many of my friends from Eastern Europe and Austria, so he was persistent. So for 6 months, every time we get together, he'd say, hey, I still want you to do that thing for me. And finally I says, okay, shut up, Frank. I will have a look. It was a 6-month deep dive, and what I was researching was all of the things that go from the long past in coatings and plastics and wood finishes and so on. And these are all made with natural products, linseed oil, towel oil, castor oil, whale oil, which is obviously not such a sustainable thing, but at the time, these were the natural things. And so I researched everything I could on that. And I'm from Europe, so I was doing a lot of studying of the German literature as well, and then I took that old technology, combined it with the modern technology, and came up with something that was unique. Now, that's not roof coating. That's curved, moldings that roll up in a box and go up and down spiral staircases, and for curved walls in buildings. Built that business up, sold it out. Eventually, it's now part of Weyerhaeuser, and so I got out of that aspect many years ago. But how it got onto roofs was our old factory. We were renting an old building in a shipyard in North Vancouver, British Columbia. And we always had these leaky roofs, and the owner of the building wouldn't fix anything. So the guys in the plant, they says, go up there with a bucket and throw it on there and see what we can do. and it held, and it held really well over the winter and so on. And at the same time, they were taking these same buckets and going around to the ships to make repairs, because we were surrounded by ships and fishing boats and personal boats. So it turned out to be a really good all-weather coating for roofs and boats, and it kind of grew from there.
That's very fascinating. It's a very fascinating story. Peter, you have founded numerous companies in various industries. I wanted to ask you, what does it take to be a successful founder, successful entrepreneur, in your opinion?
Friends of mine tell me this too, and one in particular had a great insight. He says, Peter, you have a definiteness of purpose. And I thought, wow, okay, it's interesting. And that covers a few things. So that incorporates this idea of having goals written, things written down. I mean, I still use an old-fashioned notebook. I've been doing this for about 40 years. I always take notes. Now we use technology. I write these notes by hand, and then I scan them at the end. So I don't have boxes full of these books anymore. But I do a lot of writing and setting goals, and all that's part of it. And then when something that becomes apparently that it needs to be done, it needs to be done. So that's setting out the purpose and whatever it takes, accomplishing the task at hand. Now, if something is going in a negative direction, like it's not working, then you have to assess it and look at it and kill it, so it doesn't kill you. And that's part of the sorting process. But definitely having a definiteness of purpose about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. That's important, extremely important.
Peter, which company that you founded would you say is your all-time favorite, and why?
Well, it was interesting. There was kind of two that were the most fun, and Castagra is one of them. But the one that I've always had a passion for, things to do with the railroad. Now, I'm born in Switzerland, and I think my father had train sets in the house where when I was even before I was born, he was doing this kind of thing. And Switzerland is full of trains that go up and down and fast and slow. So developing the newer generation of railroad locomotives was kind of with that younger one. But I've always loved materials science and engineering. My engineering degree is in mechanical engineering, but I've always been fascinated by chemistry and products. And think about it, everything is made with chemistry. Like there's nothing that we use that doesn't use chemistry. And I've always been fascinated by materials. And at the university, I had one instructor or professor who was head and shoulders above the rest when it came to the passion for the subject in that chemistry material science area. So those are my two favorites, Castagra and the company which the locomotives and Castagras, they all have different names, but the railway locomotives and the materials side, those are my two favorites.
Peter, I want to ask you something about scaling. What was the largest number of employees you scaled the company to, and if you want to mention the company name as well?
Well, okay, in the Castagra business today, we have 6 full-time salespeople. We're adding another one right now on the sales side, but in the production side, now a lot of that's done through contracting, but it's about 100 in there. But in the locomotive business, it was about 450. At a certain point during that side when it got reorganized and spun and sold. But those are things. But this is a tough one because what I manage directly and what other people and affiliates manage, sometimes the lines get a little bit blurry. Like for instance, a previous version of the materials company is a company called AccuFlex, which got sold into what eventually became Weyerhaeuser. Well, Weyerhaeuser is a massively big company, and after a while I hated it. It was too big. And then I wasn't doing cool technological things anymore. I was going through everybody's budgets. And that just drove me insane, because I'm not an accountant numbers guy. I'm very numbers oriented on the technical side, where it's interesting and relevant. But once it's just a day-to-day operating entity, my interest falls away for sure.
Peter, what would be like a number one practical piece of advice that you would have for someone, a founder that wants to grow their business at scale?
Whatever it is that you're going to do, make sure that there's a market, that's scalable. So, for instance, the previous company in the Castagra company, in the molding side, that market was a little bit limited. Now, Weyerhaeuser, through other technology, we're using it to start coating engineered wood products and so on. But the moldings market's a little bit limited. But what I love about roofing is the volumes are astronomically huge. And okay, in the railroad business, there's only about 30,000 locomotives in the whole United States. So your addressable market is 30,000. Well, what's the addressable market in roofs? The number is so big you can't really count it. It's in the many billions of square feet, and that's every year. So find out a market that's big. But a key part of it is make sure it's something you care about, that you're interested in, because you have to get up early, be excited about whatever it is, and be able to get up every morning excited about what the day will bring.
I love that you're saying that. I'm a big believer that meaningful work makes all the difference, no matter what you do. Could be an entry-level job, could be mid-management, could be a founder, could be anything. As long as you find meaning in it, don't you agree? That's kind of
absolutely. And what I tell people too is somebody, I've got grandkids and so on that are just getting started and whatever, and one of them, he just works at a gas station for one of the big grocery stores. And I say, whatever you're doing there, be like interested and passionate and excited about it. You'll find that opportunities come out of that within the company. But if become the person you want to be wherever you are, and then you can shift around and do other things. And right now he's noticed the customers notice him and whatever, and he wanted to leave, and then they gave him a little raise so he wouldn't go. And I say, hey, if you want to pump gas the rest of your life, be the absolute best person on the planet pumping gas, carry on. But take that attitude into whatever it is. I think we're both on board with that idea.
That's fantastic. Peter, you have received many patents on steelmaking measurements, railroad technologies, and then vegetable oil-based plastics that are widely used in construction and engineering applications. It was very hard for me to understand before starting the conversation. These inventions are in fields that are so many different from each other. How could a person, one single individual, be so, have such a broad horizon, and then be able to excel, to actually be a creator, to create, to have patents in all this, a variety of industries?
Well, there's two sides to that. One is every time you get a business to a certain size and you make a deal with somebody, it has a non-compete. So my suggestion is have something going on in an area that's way over to here, and then something else over here, because most businesses, they kind of have about a 5-year cycle, some slower, some longer. But when you sign that non-compete, it's like, okay, fine, I'm out of the way, and then I'm over here in a completely different area. So I never take a day off. so that's one of the things that helps. But the other side of that is I'm very much a student of the sciences. And the language, the common language is math. It ties all the things together. So when working on something very physical, whether it's a railroad locomotive, which is really an electric generator, it's a power plant on wheels, because we have diesel electric is our technology if we're using diesel engines. But if we're using hybrid fuel cells or other things, it's still, there's a lot of electrical engineering involved. So those electrical principles follow through. Well, in the material science engineering, it's the math is the same, maybe not the same equations, but the approach, the scientific, create a theory, do some experiments and see what results you get. That's very much the same as if you're breadboarding on an electrical thing, or working out, a stress test on a heavy mechanical piece of equipment. It really, for me, it's the same in many ways.
Peter, I wanted to ask you about an invention that goes back a long number of years. You were a part of that invention, and although at the time probably not so many people knew about it, but right now it became one of the most famous softwares in the world, and that's Windows Media Player. Would you like to share with the audience a little bit of a background on how did that happen?
Sure, that was about 30 years ago. The product that I developed with our little group at the time in North Vancouver was a product called Clipscreen. And what we were doing was, at that time in 1990, very early computers, as far as personal computers, we were very limited. The amount of RAM and the speeds of the processors and so on, and just minuscule compared to what we have today. So what we did at the time was we developed the first full motion video that did not require special hardware. We could run these things on early personal computers, and that was a really big deal. Now, we had to be very efficient with our algorithms, so the mathematical method of compressing and then decompressing that video, we pioneered that. And it's interesting that is now basically what's the Windows Media Player. Well, at the time, there, of course, this is 30 years ago, but there were NDAs in place at the time, and I'm sure that if I dig back far enough, I could find one. But but those have expired, surely. But the technology, the core technology and the principles, we established them, and really, again, it's a discovery process. So we found the most efficient way of rendering video, and had to, because it was so necessary. And and nowadays the the ability to process that information is vastly improved. But even now, like this morning, I had to move from my house over to here because the internet connection was too poor where I am up in the mountain. So it's still important to have efficient video processing, and it really hasn't changed that much since back then when we developed that, and so on. Now, there's a little bit of a funny story in there too. Is we presented it at Comdex, which is the big computer developer expo in Las Vegas, and I think they still have that show on every year now. And it's a huge trade show. So the people from Microsoft, we invited them. They came to our booth and saw the demos and so on. And it was like a 3-day show. And then I think it was the second day, for lunch, we had an opportunity to visit with Steve Jobs, who was he was very big in his next step and that aspect of developing his own computer over at Apple. And so we had that lunch thing, in his hospitality suite. It was nice and everything, but I found him a little bit artsy, to use the term. It's not a nice thing necessarily, but he was a little bit out there from my point of view. I'm a little bit more analytical, maybe less now than I was then. I was a pretty square-headed guy at the time. But for dinner, we had dinner with Bill Gates, and he was only a billionaire then. Now he wasn't a quazillionaire as he is today, but at the time, he says, yeah, we looked at your thing, and now that we know it's possible, we know that we have a path to get there, and we're going to make you an offer. I'm going to make you an offer, and you'll probably accept it, because if you don't, you know that I'm going to come up and with the same solution, because it's important that we have this capability. so he made the offer, and we did accept it. So it was interesting. But the funny part was, we did not. I told everybody, do not talk about Steve Jobs and Apple when we were over, with Bill Gates, and vice versa, because those two guys, they weren't best friends. I'll put it that way. But they were always aware and interested in what the other was doing. But they certainly had their own businesses and their own plans. But it was exciting. Ultimately, I did not like that business, and did not want to stay in that business, because it's too fast. Every day I had to get up and think, what's the next guy behind me doing? When am I going to get leapfrogged by, because the clock in the tech world is etched in or marked in nanoseconds. It was just too nervous. I'm a little bit slower, so that's why I went back to playing with trains and building materials, because I got my nerves back.
Too fast paced.
It was, and I think it still is.
Probably more than ever, if I had to guess. So, Peter, the next thing I want to ask you, you are the co-author of a book called Overcoming Inventoritis, the silent killer of innovation. What is inventoritis, and how does it kill innovation?
Okay, inventoritis it's what happens if you fall in love with your idea. Love is blind. That's the idea there. The book, actually, Tetsuya and I co-wrote it, out of a place of pain, because we had a business, we had a consulting practice, marketing consultancy, and we were doing all kinds of sports marketing and product marketing and so on, and we just had a steady stream of inventors and small businesses and larger companies. We had quite a mixed clientele, and we started seeing common themes. And one of the things that became pretty obvious is your typical passionate inventor. They're so in love with their idea and their technology that they focus too much inward. They don't handle criticism very well, and it becomes a pathology of sorts. It kills the business. And the book is titled Overcoming Inventoritis, and we had to kind of lay out steps to eliminate that problem. And now that was done 12, 13, 14 years ago now. Our thinking has evolved from that, but that basic premise still holds. If you fall in love, you become blind to things that you should be very much aware of as you're developing your business from your idea.
Peter, from someone as successful as you have been in your career, I would like to ask you, what one piece of advice would you have for the younger generation that's ready to go out in the world? They're graduating high school or college. They're actually ready to go out in a real world and be on their own and make the best of it.
Okay. Well, one is the meek do not inherit much in the real world. So I'm a bit of an Asperger's kid. I've always had that issue. So, I had really had to make a lot of effort to get better at communicating, to be able to use these tools and to not be shy about it. So definitely work on becoming as competent a communicator as you can. I think that's very, very important, because what's really our main job if we're running a business? It's just selling. It's sharing the vision, seeing people, and so on. And for me, that's not natural. I'm good at it. I think I'm good enough, anyways. But I had to really be definite about doing these things. So I joined Toastmasters, went through high levels within the organization. That took a several years period. And so focus on those communication and that's a key leadership skill. So that would be my number one. At least it was for me. That was the thing that I had to overcome over many years, and I'm not done with it either.
It's an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's number 8 in our 12 ways to overcome inventoritis. Focus on process.
Peter, how did a failure or apparent failure set you up for future success in your career?
Failure is, I don't think in terms of one. Failure is very much a part of my process. When in developing these, for instance, these roofing materials and so on, I go back to the Thomas Edison story where he had to go through 10,000 different filaments to come up with a suitable light bulb. I'm very much a fan of that approach, and just to come up with the right combinations of things to make these different products in the material sciences side. I have done tens of thousands of experiments to get to the result, and the vast majority of them fail. You try something, oh, that didn't work. Well, what did we learn from it? Why didn't it work? Where can we improve upon it, and so on. Had some big ones too. We were trying to put together a hybrid railroad locomotive for the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, or not a hybrid, but a battery locomotive. This is fairly recently. And the battery technology, the lithium ion technology, was a little bit oversold. And so we actually had a locomotive. We already had brought in about a third of the batteries. We paid some $400,000 for the battery, only to get a third of them. And then we started taking measurements and going, well, wait a minute, we're not getting the numbers that we need. So, by the time that all got done, that's a few $1 million of oops. And we actually never got that locomotive in service. I can sell you some batteries at a discount if you have a need for some. They're not that good, but I can give you a really good deal on them. So that's a current one. Now, does that mean that we're done with battery technology and so on? No, not at all. For instance, there's a lot of excitement about the iron-based battery technology that could take over from the lithium ion. There's some wonderful new technologies that are out there, and I'm constantly keeping abreast of what's coming. So again, that was a big failure, but we learned from that because that just becomes useful for going forward.
Peter, in the last 3 years, if you could think of one belief, behavior, or habit that you had to change that impacted your life in a more significant way, what would that be?
That's a deep one. Okay, get better at seeking an objective truth. It's interesting, especially in this time now. There's a lot of reliance on fake truths, and this is not acceptable. It doesn't work in the scientific world. The laws of nature are there to be discovered and observed and measured, and the better job that and I've had to improve upon this in the last 3 years. The battery example was exactly that, where I had to measure and find that the scientific truth was not at all what lined up with the truth that were coming from the sales people that were selling us these things. And so really that's something that I had to sharpen very much in the last 3 years.
Peter, our conversation is about to come to an end. I would like to ask you, is it a topic or a question that you wish I would have asked, something that you wish we would have covered during our conversation and we didn't?
No, I thought the range. I think you covered a wide variety of topics, and very well. In fact, I'm reaching out. Is there something else? It's like, well, I guess you could ask me for a prediction as to what the world will look like in 5 years from now. I'm very much an optimistic. The world has challenges, but the future I think is still bright. So maybe go in that direction.
Peter, thank you so much for accepting my invitation here. I really appreciate, I really enjoy our conversation. I hope that maybe later down the road, you would agree to come back for a second episode, because it's fascinating.
I don't do very many of these, but I do enjoy doing them. So it was a pleasure to come out and visit with you, Adrian, and hope that everybody who's watching and listening got a little something out of this to help them go forward. That makes me feel good, knowing that I'm helping others to get better at whatever it is we're doing. We're growing, and that helps build that positive future that we're talking about.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Thank you again for coming, Peter. And everybody, this is Multifamily Chronicles. I'm your host, Adrian Danila. Thank you for watching us, and I hope to see you back here for more episodes. Have a great day.